if you are looking for a book that will get you thinking, but also laughing out loud, you might want to consider this one. One Day We'll All Be Dead and None of This Will Matter, or One Day This Will Matter, is Scaachi Koul's debut collection of essays that tackle some pretty serious topics, but do so with a heavy hand of humor and some razor-sharp wit. We are happy to have Scaachi Koul in our studios this morning, and I said to you earlier, nice to meet you in person. I follow you on social media.
I know, it's been a while.
You're very saucy on social media.
Well, yeah, it's like my brand.
All right, you handle some really intense topics. You talk about race, you talk about gender, you talk about, identity politics, but you do so with a lot. With a lot of humor. At what point did you realize that this could also be funny?
Oh, birth?
Yeah, really? Why?
Yeah, birth. I mean, my dad raised me, I think, very much with that sort of acidic tongue. And I think it's hard to talk about those things without also being funny. I mean, if you're going to punch somebody in the face, you should probably kiss them first.
This is also very good advice. You made headlines as well, not only for some of your, controversial tweets that you send out, but also because you then quit Twitter. And depending on which side you were on, some people called you a coward.
Yes.
And other people were sad to see you go. Tell us about that decision.
Yeah, I mean, both sides of that argument are wrong, because you're not a folk hero for deciding that you don't want to engage with a platform that doesn't care about women or people of color, and you're not a coward because you don't want to engage with that either. But I left because it just wasn't fun anymore, and I didn't think it would become such a big deal. But
critics of you said, look, you make yourself a target by putting out statements or baiting statements.
Sure.
So then you don't get to say that this is then too much if you go and make yourself a target. What was your response?
I don't have to engage with that. I mean, just because you are a public figure in one way or another does not mean that you have to make yourself accessible to everybody all the time. And it certainly doesn't mean that you have to play by somebody else's rules when they don't feel good. And also, I mean, in terms of a baiting statement, I don't know if affirmative action is something that I would consider a baiting statement.
Fair point.
So it depends on where you're coming from, and if we're coming from like a good faith argument or if you're just here to fight.
We talked about this a little bit on the show earlier today, and this idea of being lonely if you leave social media. And you write about being lonely when you left Twitter.
Yeah, I got the internet when I was 11. I've been online for a really long time, which is probably bad. But it's how I talk to people. It's how I function, and it's the world I work in and that I live in and that I play in. And to have that sort of taken from you is really destabilizing.
This is an issue that has come up again, in particular with women in politics, or really any women who have decided to become outspoken and use social media. The attacks for women are different than the attacks are for men. My sort of rule of thumb is if you wouldn't allow somebody to walk up to you on the subway and say it out loud, then don't pay attention to it on Twitter. What's your advice for dealing with trolls? Because you have had, I mean, not just death threats, you've had verbal sexual assault online.
Yeah. I respond to some of them because I can, and because it's funny and it lets me take back some ownership over it. But I mean, I can't be prescriptive on that because it depends on what you want and how you're feeling. If it makes you feel bad, don't play.
If, when you're taking a look at, who trolls you online, is it equally men and women?
No, it's men.
All men?
Mostly men.
Why?
Because a lot of men are afraid of women who are stronger than them. And to be clear, none of those men are going to say anything to me in person. If we ran into each other, they would never say half the things that they say to me online. But no, it's very, very few women. It's mostly white dudes.
I'm curious about your perspective of this conversation that's happening around race and culture right now in Canada. These are things that, people in brown communities or colored communities have had for a long time in this country, but they have now hit sort of a national platform, a national stage. I think that this is a good thing.
Yeah.
I would love you to weigh in on the commentary about what's happening in our conversations about race and Canadian identity and identity politics. I think
the one thing I can take that's good about Trump being elected is that now everybody else who didn't think there were conversations happening about race and gender and inequity now realize that we have been talking about this forever, and now everybody else is catching up. And I think that's happening here as well with what you're seeing with the Conservative leadership race. It's the same thing. And now we've been talking about these. Brown people and Black people have been talking about this for such a long time in Canada, and now everybody else is starting to catch on.
You're prolific on social media. I've read some of your essays and your other writings. Why did you decide to do a book? Why now?
I'm very talented.
You are.
I think writing makes people feel less lonely. I think it'd be nice if somebody could read a book and feel less lonely.
You talk a lot about your parents as well. They're part of your social commentary. What do your parents think about you putting all of your outspoken thoughts in the bookstore?
I think they're just happy if it's profitable.
All right, it is profitable. It's also very funny.
Hopefully.
It is a really good read.
Thanks.
Scaachi, I'm really happy to meet you. I'm glad you're in studio
Nice to
today.
meet you too.
The book is called One Day We'll All Be Dead and None of This Will Matter. Scaachi Koul is the author of this book. Thanks for being here today.